The sun is lying. Why the next solar flare will kill the internet. The alerts hit at 2:03 a.m. Grids braced, satellites spun to safe mode, and a network engineer watched 3 undersea cables drop off her map like someone cut the world with scissors. ATMs timed out. GPS clocks drifted by microseconds that mattered. Meanwhile, in Miami, people were filming purple auroras with their phones, not realizing that glow was the warning. The sun looked calm yesterday. It wasn't. Twisted magnetic fields had been loading like a spring. Our planet-sized antenna, power lines, rails, and ocean cables was ready to collect the shock. Plot twist. The last time a storm like this hit, we didn't even have light bulbs. Roadmap of revelations. We're going to follow a fuse that's been burning for 160 years. First, the Carrington blueprint. Telegraphs threw sparks in 1859, and operators sent messages with the batteries unplugged. It's a scene everyone cites, what it really tells us and what it doesn't about today's longer, more fragile conductors. Then the sun's magnetic lie. A quiet-looking disk can hide snarled flux ropes that store more energy than a busy sunspot parade. The cycle doesn't protect you, it distracts you. We'll hit the 92-minute scramble. Why the only hard data about a storm's punch arrives just before impact, how upstream monitors at L1 buy us one orbital window, and what happens if they saturate or fail. Satellites versus Sandblaster. Solar panels degrade, electronics upset, and low Earth orbits puff with drag. Timing, navigation, and weather eyes blink, and everything on the ground feels it. Undersea cables become the main character. Repeaters every 50 to 100 kilometers and shore-based power feeds turn glass and coax into long, eager collectors of geomagnetically induced currents. One weak link, and a continent becomes an island. The grid echoes back into the internet. Transformer saturation, brownouts, and the poison of dirty power through data centers, amplifiers, and exchanges. We'll watch the internet partition, see black start for fiber, and run into weird failures. Expired crypto, broken clocks, and routing loops that won't converge. Finally, the fix versus the fairy tales, who goes dark first, and for how long and what to do that actually helps. And yes, auroras over Miami might be your first warning. The blueprint, Carrington, Quebec, and the near misses. The man in the Boston Telegraph office thought the line was haunted. A hiss, a pop, then a slap of blue light leapt from the key to his wrist. He yanked the battery leads, and the clicking kept going. Across the Atlantic, paper smoldered in Paris. In the Rockies, miners got up to make breakfast at midnight under a sky so bright you could read. It was September 1859, and the sun had thrown a coronal mass ejection straight at Earth. To understand why that matters now, we need to see the shape of the old world. Telegraph wires were long, skinny conductors stretched across continents with crude grounding. A CME, think a magnetic storm cloud carrying billions of tons of plasma, slammed into the magnetosphere and squashed it like a bell. Earth's magnetic field wobbled fast. That wobble induced electric fields in the ground and currents in anything long and conductive. The telegraph system became an accidental power plant driven by the planet. What nobody knew then was how the geometry makes the pain worse. The longer the conductor, the more voltage you pick up from slow, sweeping magnetic changes. Those telegraph lines were short compared to what we've built since. Continents spanning high-voltage lines and 1,000-kilometer undersea cables. The blueprint was already etched. Long lines collect trouble. Jump to March 13, 1989. Unknown to most people in Quebec, the sun had tossed another storm. This one wasn't as extreme as 1859, but it was fast. The kind that compresses the magnetosphere and drives strong currents through the crust. In the control room at Hydro-Quebec, alarms began to stack. Within 90 seconds, transformers on the James Bay network started to saturate. When a transformer core saturates under geomagnetically induced currents, it draws odd harmonics, trips protection, and throws off reactive power support. The grid is built to handle faults. It's not built to handle every long line leaning the same way at once. The cascade was brutal and simple. Protective relays tripped, voltage collapsed, and the province went dark. 6 million people woke to silence and cold. Outside, the aurora poured south over New England. Inside the grid, operators tried to stabilize power factors, bring generation back, and avoid cooking expensive equipment. Lights returned in hours, but the lesson lingered. You don't need wires to arc to feel a solar storm. You just need long infrastructure and bad luck with geology and geometry. Shielding helps. So do series capacitors and better grounding. But when the magnetosphere bucks hard, the continent moves with it. Now, a near miss. That should keep you up at night. In July 2012, NASA's Stereo A spacecraft got front row seats to a violent CME. It was a fast one, the kind that can arrive in under a day and carry an embedded magnetic field strong enough to wrench Earth's field sideways. The blast missed us by about a week in orbital position. If Earth had been there, the hit could have rivaled the 1859 storm. Here's where the day diverges from the telegraph era: timing and dependency. In 1989, we'd already woven satellites into weather, navigation, and timing. In 2012, we'd layered cloud computing, undersea trunk routes, precision finance, and synchronized high-voltage grids that rely on tight phase measurements. The internet's skeleton, transoceanic cables with repeaters every 50 to 100 kilometers, runs on high-voltage DC power from shore stations and delicate optical amplifiers. Data centers live or die on clean power and steady clocks. And a vast portion of intercontinental traffic simply can't detour to satellites. There isn't enough capacity. And radio links ride the same storm-tossed ionosphere, causing GPS and HF to falter. So what would have aligned differently in 2012? We'd have seen HF radio blackouts on the day side from the flare. Hours later, the CME's shock would have hit. Our upstream monitors at the Lagrange point would have given us that one orbit heads up on the magnetic field orientation, the crucial southward BZ that opens the door to severe geomagnetic storms. Operators would have had minutes to shed load, reconfigure, and push satellites into safe modes. And here's the catch. When the storm is big, some of those monitors saturate or get knocked off. The data you need most can disappear when you need it most. Meanwhile, the grid plays defense while the undersea cables quietly become the main character. Power feeding equipment on shore tied to ground would feel slow, DC-like currents induced along the seabed. Repeaters under the ocean rely on stable biasing. Throw it off and they trip to protect themselves, or worse, fail. In a partial failure, the whole cable doesn't die. It hiccups in segments, turning continents into islands. Inside those islands, services look fine. Your local video loads, your chat app opens, but the outside world is gone. Payment gateways time out, DNS answers go stale, people reboot their routers and blame the Wi-Fi. Back in 1859, the Aurora was the headline. In 1989, it was the blackout clocked at 90 seconds. In 2012, it was the bullet that missed. The blueprint through all three is clear. The sun doesn't have to be dramatic to be dangerous. It just has to push Earth's field hard enough for long enough, while our longest lines are pointed the wrong way. To see why a quiet sun can lie, we need to step inside those magnetic knots where the energy hides. The sun's magnetic lie. From the ground, the sun can look like a lazy orange disk. Fewer spots, fewer fireworks, fewer reasons to worry. That's the lie. The surface is just the skin. Under it, magnetic fields are being twisted and braided by a body that doesn't rotate like a solid. The equator laps the poles, layers shear. Field lines tangle into ropes that store energy the way a bent metal spring stores tension. They sit there quiet until they don't. Get this, the sun doesn't explode at random. Those magnetic ropes, called flux ropes, anchor into the surface around sunspots and along long, dark filaments. As plasma flows and the star's differential rotation winds them tighter, pressure builds. Reconnection is the escape hatch. Two magnetic fields forced together snap and swap partners, turning magnetic energy into heat, light, and a shove. That shove launches a coronal mass ejection, a magnetized cloud with its own embedded field, set loose into the solar system. Here's where the count fools people. Fewer sunspots doesn't mean less risk. It means fewer visible markers. Complex regions, even during a quiet phase or the descending limb of the cycle, can twist into monsters. The statistics look calmer while the physics gets spikier. Fewer storms, but the ones that form can carry stronger, more tangled fields. If one of those fields arrives with the right orientation, southward relative to Earth's field, it opens the door wide. Energy couples fast. The storm gets teeth. Timing makes it worse. At solar maximum, you see more eruptions, but they aren't all aimed at us. As the cycle rolls down, magnetic fields on the sun's surface can become more complex and stressed. You get slower buildup, then sudden releases from regions that don't telegraph their threat with giant spot counts. It's a trap. The disk looks quiet, so operators relax. The rope snaps anyway. We watch obsessively, but our eyes have blind spots. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory stares from Earth orbit, mapping the surface and the corona in ultraviolet. SOHO sits out at the Sun-Earth L1 point with a coronagraph that blocks the glaring disk and spots CMEs as they bloom. The stereo spacecraft gives side views when they're in the right positions. Together, they sketch the shape of eruptions, their speeds, and rough directions. But they can't read the most important line on the test, the exact magnetic orientation inside that cloud. That answer waits upstream in the solar wind. Until the CME's leading shock washes over our monitors near L1, we don't know if the embedded field points south enough to cause trouble or north enough to spare us. And when storms are strong, those monitors, ACE, DS-Cover, can saturate, glitch, or drop into safe modes. It's like waiting on a weather radar that might blink at landfall. Prediction ends up probabilistic by necessity. Forecasters estimate speed from coronagraph images, infer direction from solar surface maps, and run models that simulate how the cloud will steer through the heliospheric current sheet. They can issue watches and warnings with hours of lead time. But the difference between a long night of pretty auroras and a transformer-eating storm can hinge on a vector we only measure in the last 30 to 60 minutes. It's not incompetence, it's physics and geometry. Meanwhile, there's a detail that matters later. When magnetic reconnection on the sun is efficient, it can peel off overlying fields and let a CME escape faster, carrying a stronger, more coherent core field. Faster arrivals compress Earth's magnetosphere harder, which pumps more current through the crust and into our longest lines. The storm's speed and magnetic orientation work together. You need both to get from noisy to historic. So a quiet-looking sun can be storing trouble in its knots while we tell ourselves the cycle is gentle. The absence of spots is just silence, not safety. Observatories see the flare, coronagraphs see the bloom, models see a path. But the actual punch, its direction and depth, shows up late. That's the clock we met in the last act, the brutal 92-minute window after L1 screams. In that window, people with their hands on grids, satellites, and cables decide whether to sacrifice service to save hardware. And if the upstream eyes blink, they're deciding blind. Now the clock starts ticking for real. The eruption's already en route. The monitors will light up or they won't. Operators have one orbit to choose their pain, the 92-minute scramble. The first hint is a flutter in the solar wind charts. Density jumps, speed ticks up. Then the upstream monitor spits out the number everyone is waiting for. The interplanetary magnetic field turns south. Phones ring in windowless rooms. Grid control centers, satellite ops, telecom knocks. Each team opens a playbook that starts with the same sentence: reduce exposure fast. At the Sun-Earth L1 point, about 1 million miles upstream, ACE and Discover sample the shock like weather buoys on a rising tide. Forecasters at NOAA push a red update, strong coupling likely. That likely matters because the data isn't a movie. It's a handful of numbers that update every minute and can lie under stress. But the southward tick is enough. Operators move. In a grid control room, the night shift tightens voltage set points and increases reactive reserves. Lines most prone to geomagnetically induced currents get unloaded. A dispatcher orders preemptive load shedding on a vulnerable corridor, not to punish customers, but to keep a transformer from saturating and failing for good. The choice is ugly. Short pain now, or a burn machine that takes months to replace. Meanwhile, a satellite controller watches the particle flux climb. Low Earth orbiters get commands to spin to safe mode, rotate panels, and ride out the charging. On the ground, a timing engineer watches GPS quality metrics slip as ionospheric scintillation roughens the signal. They switch critical systems to holdover oscillators and network time protocol peers. Accuracy drops, stability gains. Here's the problem everyone shares. The window is short and the picture is blurry. L1 buys about 30 to 60 minutes for the shock, then another 20 to 30 for the main field to settle. That's the 92-minute scramble. It's enough to act, not enough to argue. And sometimes the buoy goes dark. Sensors saturate, telemetry stutters, the stream drops to last good value, and the room gets quiet in the worst way. A midnight call hits a telecom knock lead. Their dashboard is a wall of greens. Then it isn't. Alarms on coastal power feeding equipment start to stack. Not failures, warnings. The PFE controllers see ground potential shifts that look like DC bias, creeping into systems designed for clean, centered current. The lead has 2 buttons: ride it and hope, or take down a transoceanic span deliberately before a surge trips repeaters across 6,000 kilometers. One click isolates a continent. The other risks losing it for days. They call the cable owner. A minute passes. Another, they pull it. While that's happening, the grid's defensive posture creates its own turbulence. Load shedding shifts power flows. Protective relays see odd harmonics as transformer cores flirt with saturation. An engineer watches phaser measurement units jitter as timing degrades. They widen thresholds so the system doesn't interpret the storm as an internal failure. At a data center across town, UPS systems transfer the battery a hair sooner than usual because the incoming waveform is ugly. Generators spin up. One refuses to start. Cooling fans ramp. A switch hums hotter than spec. What nobody outside these rooms sees is the debate running under every decision. You can save hardware by sacrificing service, or you can try to preserve service and gamble on hardware. The first path angers customers. The second can cripple regions. The difference between overreacting and underreacting is a few micro-Teslas and a magnetic orientation that might change in 10 minutes. The blind spot haunts the timeline. If upstream monitors saturate, operators fall back on ground magnetometer networks and modeled geoelectric fields. Those lag. A forecaster radios, ground currents are spiking faster in the Midwest than the model predicted. A utility with long east-west lines accelerates its plan and drops more load. In a finance hub, a network team forces time servers to Stratum 2 only, banning direct GPS until the storm passes. Latency jumps. Consistency returns. In orbit, a LEO constellation lowers duty cycles and raises link budgets to punch through scintillation. Some satellites drift because drag just jumped as the upper atmosphere heated. Meanwhile, a weather satellite at geostationary altitude reports charging events on long dielectric surfaces. The ops team dims non-essential instruments to reduce risk. A TV network complains about loss of capacity. They get a short answer. We're keeping the bird alive. On the coast, the PFE board shows smoother currents after the deliberate cut. Inside the continent, traffic reroutes through other landings. Latency spikes. A content delivery network sees caches overrun and starts shedding low-priority requests to keep origin traffic within limits. In a hospital, a nurse notices that the medication cabinet's network check-in takes longer. It still works. For now. This is the moment everything compresses. The Aurora is pretty outside Miami. Inside windowless rooms, people trade reliability for survivability in 15-minute slices. The storm's first punch lands. The second is coming. How hard it hits depends on a field they can't fully see and choices they can't take back. The undersea cable kill chain. Under the ocean, the internet isn't cloud and magic. It's glass, copper, and power. Almost every intercontinental click you make crosses fiber buried in trenches or laid on seabeds, stitched together by repeaters the size of carry-on luggage every 50 to 100 kilometers. Those repeaters don't sip power locally. They're fed from shore by high-voltage DC, hundreds to thousands of volts, riding down copper conductors inside the cable. At each landing, power-feeding equipment, PFEs, push stable current into that copper and bleed return through ground. It's neat, elegant, and during a geomagnetic storm, dangerously perfect. Here's why stakes go sky-high fast. Cables are the arteries of the global internet. Satellites can't replace their capacity. A single, busy transatlantic trunk can move more data than all but the largest constellations combined. If a few key spans stumble, the world doesn't go offline everywhere. It fractures. Regions keep talking to themselves and go mute to each other. Payments hang between continents. Authentication calls home and gets no answer. A late-night gamer in Lagos blames the router. A trading desk in London quietly flips the voice because the market data feed is stuttering. The action starts invisible, in the seafloor and shoreline geology. Geomagnetic storms drive slow, DC-like electric fields through the crust and oceans. Long conductors, rails, pipelines, and yes, cable grounds and armoring pick up that push. PFEs are built around stable current and predictable returns. During a storm, the ground starts to wander. The return path bias shifts. Controllers see creeping offsets and ripple riding on what should be a clean baseline. They try to hold current constant. The system resists. Meanwhile, repeaters along the route are doing delicate analog work. Inside those housings, erbium-doped fiber amplifiers, pump lasers, control loops that assume the line current and voltage stay in a tidy box. Throw a slow surge across thousands of kilometers, and you can shove components toward protection thresholds. Some repeaters trip briefly, restart and lock back. Others stay down until a remote command rebalances power and resets bias. If the surge is sharp enough, a few will fail for good. You don't patch that with a reboot. You send the ship in good weather to fish a cable off the bottom of the ocean. Choke points make the plot tighter. The North Atlantic looks busy on a map, but most capacity funnels through a handful of landings in
The UK, Ireland, France, the US Northeast and Eastern Canada. The Pacific has its own bottlenecks. Japan, US, Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong, California, with critical branches into Taiwan and the Philippines. Lose 2 or 3 spans at once and traffic piles onto the survivors, then onto terrestrial backhauls never sized for it. Latency triples, queues fill, protocols built to back off on loss slow to a crawl. In a coastal PFE room, the alarms don't scream catastrophe, they whisper out of spec. The display shows ground electrode potentials drifting tens, then hundreds of volts relative to norm. Engineers know the drill. Reduce line current to widen margins, rebalance feeds between landings, and if necessary, split a multi-segment system to isolate the most stressed span. Each step steals headroom for data. SNR drops on the optical path, so the operator downshifts modulation formats. More robust, less efficient. Capacity falls just as demand spikes from rerouting. Then human judgment becomes the weak link and the saving grace. A cable consortium runs a bridge with multiple owners on the line. Someone argues to ride it out. Someone else wants to preemptively drop a branch with the worst geology. The deciding voice remembers a buried post-mortem from a smaller storm. A particular landing's ground electrode sits over highly resistive rock. It behaved badly before. They cut that branch for 2 hours. Across an ocean, routers reroute. A video platform sees a sudden imbalance and shuffles cache fill to a different coast. For a few minutes, users watch a progress bar instead of a stream. Now the ripple comes back on land. Internet exchanges near landings see traffic matrices morph into weird shapes. Some peers throttle to protect their backbones. A Tier 1 carrier prefers routes through a path that's up but barely. BGP dutifully follows, then flaps when packet loss ticks above a hidden threshold. The instability looks like malice to some systems. DDoS filters tighten, exactly when you don't want them to. A bank's payment gateway times out to its processing partner on another continent. The app shows try again. People do. The retrieves become their own flood. Meanwhile, not every failure is a big cinematic break. Partial repeater trips carve holes in the spectral plan across wavelengths. Think of a 12-lane highway where lanes 5 and 6 occasionally vanish for a second and come back skewed. Forward error correction eats the small hits until it doesn't. Then the error budget runs out. Guaranteeing critical traffic demands policing. A provider squeezes out best effort flows. Social media slows. Financial heartbeat packets get through. This is where the micro-story lives. A submarine network engineer leans over a wall-sized map that normally looks like a tidy spiderweb. Tonight, 3 lines are grayed out and 2 others glow yellow. She knows the names of the seabed segments and the quirks of their grounds. She drops a soft open to bleed bias off a hot route. 10 minutes of darkness on a branch to save the trunk. Her phone buzzes with a furious message from a content platform. She types back one sentence, "I just kept your other half alive." Above the waves, the storm still drives the magnetosphere. Below, the PFEs hum and nudge. Some landings see currents normalize as the main phase eases. Others get hit by a sudden substorm, rebrightening, and the cycle repeats. When the sky glows over Miami, it means the seafloor is humming too. And as cables wobble, the machines tying the sky to Earth begin to take their hits next. Satellites versus Sandblaster. While the cables wobble, the sky machines take the next punch. In low Earth orbit, particle counts tick up like a Geiger counter, getting nervous. Solar panels lose efficiency as energetic particles knock atoms out of place. A slow bruise that never fully heals. The fast damage is different. Single event upsets flip bits, latch up chips, and force satellites to reboot in the worst possible moment. Controllers start flipping constellations into defensive postures. Lower data rates, higher error correction, more redundancy, because the plasma around Earth just got rough. Here's the part you feel without seeing it. GPS signals, already whisper quiet by the time they reach the ground, pass through a storm-stirred ionosphere that acts like boiling glass. It's called scintillation. The phase wobbles, the group delay stretches. Your phone's map shrugs it off with Wi-Fi hints and inertial sensors. A timing server feeding a bank, a cellular core, or a grid phaser network doesn't. Microseconds slip. The fix is holdover, rubidium or oven-controlled crystal oscillators that can remember the tick for a while. But holdover is a parachute, not a jet. Drift accumulates. Networks start to disagree about what now is. Meanwhile, Starlink-class LEO constellations fight a different enemy, drag. The storm heats the upper atmosphere and puffs it higher. Satellites feel it like a headwind. In 2022, a smaller event caused dozens of brand new birds to re-enter. Operators learned. Today, they raise altitude margins preemptively, spin panels to reduce cross-section, and budget propellant for extended station keeping. It works. Until it doesn't. If the density spikes faster than models predict, some vehicles lose the fight. A handful of deorbits isn't the disaster. The network reaction is. As nodes go missing, mesh links reroute, gaps open, and throughput drops where users least expect it. At geostationary altitude, the Sandblaster looks different. Satellites park over the equator and stare at Earth for decades. Their orbits are stable. Their environment isn't. The storm floods the magnetosphere with energetic electrons that can seep into deep dielectrics over hours. Deep charging. Surfaces charge too. Differential potentials build as shaded parts and sunlit parts accumulate charge at different rates. One arc discharge in the wrong place can reset a payload or scar a harness. Operators dim instruments, tweak, pointing to minimize charging, and sometimes ride out the worst with minimal operations. It sounds cautious because it is. All of this flows downhill into timing. Every modern system that moves packets or money lives on clocks. Financial trades timestamped to microseconds. Telecom cores use precision time protocol to sync radios and switches. Power grids monitor phase angles with phaser measurement units that assume GPS-disciplined clocks agree to within microseconds across a continent. Scintillation turns the primary time source squishy. Some systems switch to multi-GNSS, GLONASS, Galileo, BeiDou, to average out the chaos. Others fall back to network time, which was never meant to be absolute in this way. Mismatched epochs ripple outward as small lies that break big promises. Here's how it looks on the ground. A mobile network's base stations start to desynchronize. Handoffs get flaky, dropped calls climb. Packet core gateways see jitter climb beyond jitter buffers. Video conferencing apps adapt, then cough. In a bank's data center, a cluster that depends on tight clock skew for consensus starts seeing outliers. The algorithm is robust, but the margins are thin. It pauses leadership elections to avoid split brain. Transactions queue. Users see a spinner. Weather eyes blink too. Polar orbiting satellites that feed daily forecasts cross the auroral zones where particle flux is meanest. Some instruments saturate, others switch to safe mode. Forecast models lose a few swaths of data at exactly the moment aviation and grid operators could use better guidance about upper-level winds and ionospheric conditions. The irony is familiar by now. The storm makes the sensors you rely on to understand the storm less reliable. A micro story from an ops desk. A timing engineer watches GPS carrier to noise ratios fall across half their receivers. They flip their grandmasters into holdover, then prioritize a terrestrial PTP feed over a clean fiber span that still looks good. 30 minutes later, a reroute from a sick transatlantic cable adds 10 milliseconds to that path. The PTP servo loops that were stable start to breathe. She reduces sync intervals to ride through the jitter. The counters flatten. Her boss texts, "Did we just lose precision?" She replies, "We kept coherence. Precision comes back later." Meanwhile, the LEO constellation operator sends a bulletin. Expect reduced throughput over certain regions while they compensate for drag and radiation. On the same screen, a GEO television feed stutters as the satellites.
Power subsystem recovers from a charging event. Ground stations switch to diversity antennas to fight scintillation fades. Viewers call their providers. The storm doesn't care. It keeps feeding the radiation belts and stirring the ionosphere, and then the hidden coupling shows up. Timing drift from the sky infects ground networks. Routers whose keep alives assume stable clocks overreact to harmless jitter and drop adjacencies. BGP sessions reset, routes flap. Financial venues widen spreads because they don't trust timestamps. The grid watches PMUs disagree and widens protected thresholds to avoid tripping on phantom oscillations. When sky timing slips, ground machines start arguing, and that argument spills into power, where phase and trust matter most. The grid echo back into the internet. Power is the internet's oxygen, but the storm has turned the air thin and dirty. In control rooms, operators keep the lights on by leaning hard on reactive support. Capacitor banks switched in, voltage targets nudged up, long lines unloaded where geology invites geomagnetically induced currents. The physics is slow and mean. DC-like currents push transformer cores toward saturation. Once they saturate,
The waveform warps, odd harmonics bloom, and protective relays start reading ghosts as faults. Every correction steals margin from somewhere else. Those harmonics don't stop at substations. They ride into cities as voltage sags and flickers that look like a bad brownout. Data centers feel the wobble first in the UPS rooms. Double conversion systems catch the distortion and transfer the battery more often, chewing through minutes of holdover that were meant for clean outages, not 1,000 tiny insults. Generators fire, but not all at once. A starter fails on a set that passed the last weekly test. A fuel pump hesitates. The facility is Tier 3 on paper. Tonight, it's a chain of machines that all need to behave at the same time. Cooling becomes a second clock. Crack units pull extra amps against the press voltage. Some trip, then restart out of phase with their peers, sending surges back into a shaken electrical room. In a hot aisle, exhaust air climbs 5 degrees in 3 minutes. Batteries that love 22 degrees hate 28. A network switch that tolerated ripple starts to squeal under thermal load. A tech puts a hand on the bezel and feels the hum change. Meanwhile, the optical world isn't immune. In metro huts and long-haul amplifier sites, brief brownouts force lasers to rebias and control loops to relock. Erbium-doped fiber amplifiers don't like hiccups. They'll shut down to protect themselves, then take long, careful seconds to return. An amplifier chain out of order is a broken sentence. Packets start, stumble, and drop. When power returns, many systems don't come back in the right order. A roadmap that assumed router, then transport, then peering, meets reality. Transport up on one side, down on the other. Routers booting into a world where their neighbors aren't there yet. Hello loops, hello flaps. Inside a regional exchange, the lights stay on, but stability doesn't. Peer A sees loss on Peer B and withdraws. Route reflectors dutifully spread the news. Traffic sloshes to other peers that already carry rerouted transoceanic flows. Buffers fill. Queue management that looked fair yesterday looks brutal now. A CDN tries to pin traffic to nearby edges to reduce backbone load. But those edges are nursing dirty power and conservative cooling profiles. Nodes throttle to live. Here's where the storm gets personal. A hospital's EMR sits in a resilient data center that just rode 2 UPS transfers in 8 minutes. During the second, a cooling unit paused long enough for a top-of-rack switch to hit thermal throttling. It didn't die, it slowed. The EMR stayed up, but session handoffs jittered. Nurses had to raw twice during a code. Nobody blames the sun at 3 a.m. They blame the computer that spun. In a bank's core cage, the UPS did its job. The generators took the load. But the grid sag echoed as clock jittered through GPS-disciplined timing receivers, so the team clamped to holdover sooner than they liked. A stray breaker chatter mid-transfer forced a cluster to re-elect the leader. Consensus paused and resumed. Nothing was lost, but latency jumped from 20 milliseconds to 90 for 2 minutes. The trading desk didn't place a few orders. The risk manager shrugged. Better than a corrupted ledger. Outside, a municipal utility toggled series capacitors on a corridor known for GIC trouble. It helped, until a substorm rebrightening pushed ground currents again. A transformer in a rural node nudged into mild saturation. Its protection scheme saw harmonics and tripped. 10,000 homes blinked. A regional ISP had its head in there. Their upstream went to backup power cleanly, but a low voltage dip at the wrong millisecond made 2 PON shells reboot out of sync. Hundreds of modems grabbed new leases. DHCP.
Servers saw a storm of requests and briefly hit capacity. Users posted internet down from phones riding a cellular network whose backhaul was now on a microwave ring with less headroom. Meanwhile, the long tail of fiber amplifiers kept misbehaving. A long-haul operator saw 3 spans flap within 5 minutes as local utility voltage sagged just below their tolerances. Each flap forced optical supervisory channels to renegotiate. Transport stayed up, but error rates spiked, and forward error correction ran hot, swallowing margin that should have been saved for rain fades on terrestrial radio fill. A layer above, routers saw incrementing CRCs and did what they were told. Drop bad packets, prefer cleaner paths. Those paths were already crowded. BGP path hunting began to look like indecision. The fix in these rooms isn't heroics, it's boring playbooks. Lock generators on stable loads, throttle non-essential cooling to keep critical racks in range. Force order on reboots. Transport first, then edge, then core, then peering. Pin BGP sessions to fewer, fatter neighbors while the grid breathes. Raise keep-alive timers to ride the jitter.
except that a few milliseconds of added latency is cheaper than another flap. A micro-story lands like a warning. A Tier 3 data center, 2 utility feeds, M+1 everything, rides through an ugly sag. For 4 minutes, one of the chillers doesn't restart. Hot aisle hits 32. A bank's core switch designed to live forever throttles to save itself. A top-of-rack switch in the payment cluster drops a line card. Failover works, but hashing changes. 0.5% of transactions time out and retry. The ops team sees a blip and a graph that looks like noise. Tomorrow, an engineer will pull logs and find the timestamp. It aligns with a magnetometer spike 100 miles away. Even when power returns to smooth and clean, not everything wakes right. Stateful systems come back with forgotten promises. Optical paths hold skew from asymmetric restarts. Clocks disagree by a sliver. Software built for yesterday's 5 nines meets today's don't fry the transformer. The storm's echo isn't just light in the sky. It's harmonics in copper, heat in aisles, and timing in arguments. And it pushes the map toward a new shape. Islands that still glow but can't hear each other. The Great Internet Partition. Maps still glow, but routes don't agree. From a user's chair, it starts as a stutter. An app opens, the timeline loads, then any link to a foreign site spins forever. Inside backbone rooms, BGP looks like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. Providers withdraw routes they can't reach. Neighbors prefer paths that briefly look shorter, then collapse. Path hunting kicks in. Announce, test, fail, withdraw. Over and over. Convergence, the process that usually takes seconds, smears into minutes. The global table isn't wrong, it's anxious. Stakes land fast. Platforms that serve locally feel up, so status pages show green. But cross-border calls, auth tokens, payment API hits, media origin pulls, time out because the undersea spans that carry them are impaired or throttled. Users blame their Wi-Fi. Businesses can't settle card transactions because the acquirer's gateway is across an ocean that's now a bottleneck. A rideshare app works in one city and dies in another, purely because one region's exit to the rest of the world is pinned to a sick cable. DNS makes it weirder. The root and TLD infrastructure are built to ride storms, any casted across continents. They stay visible. The failures bloom one layer downstream. Recursive resolvers inside islands lose their upstreams to certain authoritative name servers. Cached records keep things humming until TTLs expire. Then a quiet timer becomes a cliff. A token validation domain can't refresh, a CDN's edge can't resolve origin, and an app that looked fine 5 minutes ago goes blank. Engineers start extending TTLs on the fly to slow the decay, but some answers are already stale and harmful. Old IPs that point to paths with black holes in the middle. CDNs try to save the day and end up offering a mirror of the chaos. Edge nodes keep serving cached content. Signatures and tokens embedded in pages age out. A login attempt lands on an edge that can't reach its origin to verify. The browser retries, the platform sees suspicious activity, and tightens security. Meanwhile, dynamic content farms into a dwindling pool of reachable origins. Those origins throttle to survive. The sleek illusion of a global platform breaks into slices. Some countries get yesterday's version, others get nothing, a few get pristine service, and wonder what everyone else is complaining about. Payment rails show the partition with a cruel simplicity. Tap to pay leans on online authorization. When that path fails, terminals drop to offline mode, allow for small transactions, limited in count, and bounded by a clock that assumes time is trustworthy. With timing shaky and routes unstable, merchants start seeing call issuer. ATMs work on the corner where the bank's internal network still reaches its core, but the machine across town, fronted by a different backhaul, refuses every card. Not panic, just friction that stacks into missed sales and frayed tempers. Inside Knox, the pattern is familiar but larger. BGP dampening suppresses flappers, delaying good news when a path genuinely recovers. Operators pin critical adjacencies and raise keep-alive timers to trade precision for calm. They build manual preference lists that force traffic through less optimal but more predictable exits. It helps in pockets. Elsewhere, an ISP with a single upstream discovers that redundant paths really means two routers pointed at the same faraway AS. When that AS is starved of transoceanic capacity, both lines are decorations. Microstories pile up. A startup in Nairobi wonders why their dashboard is fine, but their payment provider in Frankfurt is unreachable. Their ISP shows green. A trace route dies somewhere in Marseille where capacity is being rationed by necessity, and a maintenance window nobody wants to close. In Sao Paulo, a streaming service holds steady because it built a deep on-net cache in peering-rich 9Ps. In Johannesburg, the same service sputters because its nearest healthy origin sits overseas, and the nearest cable's PFEs are still in conservative mode. Operators fall back on playbooks that read like wartime rationing, prefer local peering, even with competitors, strip out traffic engineering tricks that depend on path symmetry, disable fancy congestion control that confuses loss from congestion with loss from error bursts, force TLS session resumption to be more forgiving when tickets can't be refreshed, pre-position software artifacts and config bundles on island local stores so deployments don't try to pull from a dead origin. Then the failures get human. A regional ISP trying to help announces a more specific route for a popular CDN prefix to keep users local. It works, until their upstream filters refuse the more specifics from another region and return traffic hairpins through a path that's up but feeble. Latency doubles, then triples. A fix intended to localize traffic becomes a trap. The engineer backs it out and pins sessions manually. Half an hour later, a different region repeats the mistake. DNS teams make triage choices. Freeze negative caching to avoid poisoning resolvers with serve file during brief origin outages. Extend TTLs for auth and identity domains, so tokens keep validating in island mode. Public resolvers in some countries quietly bias answers toward reachable edges, even if they aren't ideal. It's bending the truth for availability. It's the right call. Users experience it as islands. Messaging within a country works. Video calls overseas glitch or fall back to voice. Small retailers run cache only for a day. Big platforms look moody. The loudest complaint isn't down. It's why is this so inconsistent? And in boardrooms, someone asked the wrong question. Can't we just use satellites? The answer stays the same. You don't replace terabits with megabits on demand. You route around wounds, you reduce pressure, and you wait for the ocean to calm. Recovery isn't a switch. It's a negotiation between glass, copper, plasma, and patience. And it sets the stage for a reboot that's harder than turning things back on. Black start for fiber. The storm eases, but the network doesn't just wake up. It has to be started like a power grid after a blackout. Slowly, in phases, with people forcing order onto machines that want to rush. The first rule sounds backward. Don't light everything at once. Bring up spans, then amplifiers, then transport, then routing, then peering. Cables come first. Skip a step, and you boot into chaos. PFE teams nudge line current up in narrow steps, watching ground potentials and repeater noise floors. If a branch trips, they hold and bleed bias before trying again. When a long span finally holds, optical transport engineers rebuild the spectral plan, reassign wavelengths, rebalance launch power, and choose sturdier modulation to claw back margin. Capacity is precious and smaller than yesterday. They spend it like cash. Internet exchanges feel like airports after a snowstorm. Operators triage, bring up core fabrics, limit port speeds to keep buffers from drowning, and admit peers in a controlled order. Route reflectors start clean, with dampening reset and policies tightened. Big networks pin only a handful of adjacencies at first, keeping the table small while they test health. Then they widen deliberately, watching for flaps before letting automation scale. Here's the hidden snag: trust. Control planes live on cryptography and time. RPKE routes should be validated, but the certificate world took a beating while clocks drifted. Expired certs, unreachable CRLs, and validators that boot before NTP settles turn valid routes into unknown. Some operators flip to prefer
Valid, except unknown, instead of strict reject. Just long enough to move traffic. Others stand up local RPKI caches, fed over known good terrestrial links, then slowly tighten the screws as time sources stabilize. Speaking of time, this is where the hangover hurts. NTP pools are reachable again, but GPS is still messy at high latitudes and in equatorial scintillation zones. Grandmasters come out of holdover cautiously, blending multiple GNSS constellations and known good PTP feeds over fiber. Network timers get conservative. Longer pole intervals, wider thresholds. It feels wrong to accept less precision. It buys coherence. Teams mark systems clock healthy only after they pass drift checks against a quorum of sources. Microstory. A sleepy engineer at an 9XP stares at a route map that was supposed to be temporary. At 4 a.m., he edits a community to prefer a local peer for a specific CDN prefix.
he fat fingers the regex. For 6 minutes, his region accidentally prefers every international egress for that CDN. Traffic sticks local, then hairpins through a weak backhaul. A country slows. He reverts, breathes, and pins the change with a second engineer watching. It's quiet damage, the kind nobody brags about and everyone learns from. Partial peering returns next. Operators bring up high-value neighbors, clouds, CDNs, payment networks, before long-tail peers. They freeze traffic engineering tricks that rely on symmetry. Meds and AS-PAF prepends stay in a drawer until the ocean proves it can be trusted. Hold down timers lengthen to keep BGP from chasing ghosts. Anycast services undrain nodes carefully, one city at a time, ready to redrain if a cable span coughs. On the enterprise edge, identity and PKI wake up cranky. OCSP responders and CRL hosts were unreachable. Clients cached unknown and decided to be strict. Help desks filled with can't log in that vanish the moment a validator refreshes. Some teams push emergency configs to trust stapled responses longer. Others extend token lifetimes to straddle the wobble, knowing they'll roll them back in a week. Software adds a second wave of trouble. Queues held during the storm flood forward like a thaw. Rate limiters clamp. Caches evict hot entries. Item potency bugs show up as duplicated orders and double notifications. The fix is unglamorous. Throttle replay rates, widen circuit breakers, and stage backfills over hours. A platform that lost a region warms it back with shadow traffic before inviting users. SREs pin deployments, audit feature flags, and refuse just one quick change. Black start for fiber ends when boring becomes normal. PFEs sit within margins. Amplifiers hold. Transport errors drop back to background noise. Clocks agree within microseconds across metros. RPKI flips back to strict peering fills out. The map still shows islands, but the ferries run on time. The storm isn't over, it's background. And now markets, food, and hospitals have to do math with clocks that only just remembered what now means.
The hidden dependencies. The storm doesn't hit shelves, it hits math. Markets open on clocks, hospitals chart on clocks, trucks move on clocks. When timing goes weird and routes turn into mazes, the quiet dependencies start to fail in ways that look like bureaucracy, not disaster. Trading firms see it first. Price feeds that normally arrive in microseconds drift into jitter. Exchanges widen spreads and slow matching engines by hair-thin margins to avoid missequenced trades. Settlement rails depend on cross-border confirmations. When transoceanic links crawl, confirmations miss windows. A trade isn't lost, it's late. And late cascades into capital being somewhere, but not available. Risk desks raise limits to keep desks moving. Banks bump intraday credit lines. The safety margin is money you can't use. Insurers freeze in a different way. Claims platforms validate policy status and fraud signals against upstream scattered across clouds and continents. With DNS answers getting stale and identity checks timing out, adjusters can't finalize payouts. The company issues a friendly memo. Temporary pause on non-critical disbursements while systems stabilize. It's not a conspiracy, it's a workaround for a ledger that's reachable here but not there. Airlines and logistics get punched by weather and timing together. Polar orbiting sats miss a few swaths. Models still run just with fewer observations. Dispatchers revert to conservative routes. Flights that rely on precise RNAV and GBAS procedures meet tighter performance checks. When GPS is squishy, alternates come out. Arrival banks spread. A hub sneezes, a continent yawns. Fuel burn rises by 1% here, 3% there. Gate plans slip because crews time out. Ports run on databases that think in minutes. Berth scheduling software calls upstream services for tugs, pilots, and cargo availability. Those calls wobble. The port goes manual. Paper movement orders on clipboards. VHF chatter. A whiteboard that looks confident and lies by omission. Gantry cranes keep moving. The yard clogs because trucks aren't arriving on the cadence the plan assumed. That's not panic, it's density. Railroads drop to slow rules when signaling trust erodes. A dispatch center that normally grants authorities over dark territory relies on GPS-disciplined clocks to bound separation. With holdover ticking and jitter rising, they increase spacing. Trains meet and pass slower. A single hotbox detector that can't phone home forces a crew to stop and walk. 1 hour becomes 3. Carloads get out of order at the next yard. The build plan for a long intermodal train changes.
A dozen trucks wait idle. Trucking dispatchers live inside web dashboards backed by APIs that now respond like they're underwater. Some fleets fall back to SMS and phone trees. Drivers pick up paper bills of lading at warehouses whose badge systems took too long to check certs. A driver waits an extra 40 minutes because the yard management system can't reconcile a container number. The container's in the yard, the record isn't. Multiply that by 1,000. It looks like a labor issue. It's a timing issue. Inside a regional grocer's warehouse, scanners beep. But the reconciliation engine between inventory and orders lives in a cloud region that's reachable through a single saturated cable. The WMS keeps local state and prints pick lists. The nightly true-up fails. Trucks leave with mostly right pallets. The CFO's view of inventory lags reality by a day. Buyers hold back on reorders because the dashboard shows surplus. Shelves thin without panic. It's not demand, just fog. Hospitals slide back a decade in an hour. Electronic medical records are up, but external drug interaction checks and eligibility pings time out. Pharmacies issue a local override. Doctors write on paper knowing it'll be keyed later. Radiology sends studies on portable drives down the hall because the imaging archive feels like it's across an ocean. A nurse tapes a printout of a med schedule above a station. Accuracy is fine, availability is the problem. Farm decisions drift too. Satellite-derived soil moisture and evapotranspiration feeds help irrigation planning and spraying windows. A few missed passes and a jittery downlink turn models into averages. Agronomists recommend conservative watering. Pumps run a little longer. Diesel deliveries follow a schedule that assumes card networks clear at the pump. The station's offline mode allows a few fills, then locks. A co-op manager releases fuel on paper to known farms. Trust replaces auth for a day. Payment friction accumulates like sand. Terminals time out and retry. Offline limits hit caps. Small shops put a cash preferred sign on a door. Not because the world is ending, but because reconciliation with their acquirer will be ugly tomorrow if they keep approving on flaky lines today. ATMs dispense within the bank's island. Interbank cash out fails across a boundary nobody on the sidewalk can see. A
Micro-story lands in a fluorescent aisle. A warehouse supervisor watches handheld spin while the RF gun tries to post a pic. He pulls yesterday's printed route sheet from a clipboard. Forklifts start moving. He radios dispatch. We'll run the 10 a.m. cut. Expect the system to be wrong for a few hours. At noon, his counterpart at the grocer calls, "Truck staged. We'll take what you've got." Shelves won't look empty. They'll look picked over. All of this is fixable, but not fast. It's not a power outage, it's a trust outage of clocks, routes, and validations. The workarounds are human. Widen windows, accept paper, ship what you're sure of, defer what you aren't. The cost is small in a day, large over a week. And just as everyone starts to believe it's under control, the system does something mean. It half heals. That's the false calm waiting around the corner. The false calm and secondary failures. The sky dims. Magnetometers relax. Dashboards fade from red to yellow. People exhale, and that's when the second storm starts. Quiet, delayed, and mean. Components that took glancing blows during the peak begin failing one by one, like light bulbs after a voltage surge. Everyone thinks we're back. The system disagrees. Latent hardware stress shows up first in space and undersea. GEO satellites that took deep dielectric charge arcs during the storm begin to misbehave hours later. A payload controller resets twice in a day. Engineers suspect a hotspot in cable harness insulation. They reconfigure power paths, losing a transponder they swore was healthy yesterday. In Leo, a few vehicles that fought drag on razor-thin margins are now propellant poor. Station keeping gets rationed. Coverage maps have new dents. On the seabed, repeaters that rode within spec start drifting. A handful develop bias creep, tiny leakage that pushes control loops to the edge. They don't die, they start flickering. An optical span that held steady through the worst begins dropping a wavelength here, a wavelength there. FEC works harder. Margin melts. PFEs raise current delicately. A ground electrode burps. The ripple returns. Solar panels everywhere have micro wounds. Efficiency charts show a percent loss that won't come back. Power budgets tighten. At a weather satellite, an instrument that was already power hungry now trips its watchdog under routine load. Ops reduce duty cycle. The forecast model loses another sliver of sky on a week when aviation needs more, not less. On the ground, software wakes up cranky.
Cues that buffered billions of events during the chaos start replaying into systems that just regained breath. That replay looks like an attack to automated defenses. Rate limiters clamp, wafts tighten, and backoffs align across fleets in a rhythmic surge. The thundering herd you read about in postmortems. A payments API that survived the storm begins timing out because its own client SDKs all retry at the same exponential schedule. Engineers randomize jitter on the fly. It helps, and it reveals a new crack: cache corruption. Caches fed through sick links during the peak quietly stored partial objects and bad signatures. Now with routes open, edge nodes push those wrong bytes to healthy origins. Signature verifiers balk. Purge commands race a propagation delay that isn't uniform because DNS TTLs were stretched during the storm. Some users see a fix instantly. Others stay stuck for hours behind a resolver that learned to lie and won't forget until the timer dies. Human fatigue becomes a failure mode. Shifts that stretch through the night hand off with scribbled notes and assumptions. An on-call silences an alert pattern that looked like noise at 4 a.m. At noon, that pattern escalates into a real outage when a misclassified repeater flicker syncs with a brittle traffic engineering rule. A region stalls. The runbook says rollback. The last good config was rolled during the storm and now depends on a time source that drifted. Someone improvises. They patch the patch. It works, but it lives outside version control for 6 hours longer than anyone intended. Microstory. A cloud provider's storage cluster spent the storm in degraded mode, holding writes locally until a quorum returned. The quorum is back, so compaction and rebalance kick in across 1,000 nodes. Disks thrash, latency triples. A customer running a hospital imaging archive sees study loads crawl just as the afternoon rush hits. Their support ticket reads, "Everything is slower after you fixed it." The fix wasn't the cause, the backlog was. Secondary failures hit trust hardest. Certificate refreshes that were deferred during the storm now cascade. A regional PKI responder comes back with a bad clock. CRLs look from the future. Clients following the spec do the right thing. They refuse. Identity flows break in a city that had perfect power and clean fiber. The local fix is ugly but effective. Pin a known good stapled response, extend grace for 24 hours, and audit.
Everything tomorrow. Grid echoes linger too. Transformers that flirted with saturation run warmer for days. Operators derate them conservatively, shifting flows onto corridors that weren't sized for the extra load. In one city, that choice lines up with scheduled maintenance nobody canceled because the storm ended. A substation goes to single contingency on a hot evening. A neighborhood browns out. Social media blames solar storms a day late. The utility blames a planned outage. Both are a little right. Confidence takes the biggest hit. Users tolerated the night of weirdness. The next day's stumbles feel avoidable. Executives ask for autopsies before systems are stable. Engineers split attention between firefighting and explaining. That split creates more fires. The false calm ends the same way it began, with a small, avoidable mistake lit by a big, invisible stress. A junior operator restarts a stable PFE to clear a nuisance alarm that's been blinking since the peak. The restart hits during a subtle substorm re-brightening. 2 repeaters down the line flicker. BGP shifts. A bank's private link flaps. Failover doesn't trigger because the health check trusts DNS that's still on extended TTL. 10 minutes of darkness in a place that thought it was done with the storm. By sunset, the sky is ordinary. The systems aren't. The lesson lands hard. Recovery has edges, and you can fall off them days after the aurora fades. The real fix versus wishful thinking. Everyone wants a silver bullet, a magic satellite, a miracle filter, a press conference that says solved. The fixes that work are dull, layered, and built before headlines. They don't stop storms. They keep bad nights from becoming lost months. Start upstream. One buoy at L1 isn't enough. We need redundancy that doesn't fail the same way at the same time. Multiple monitors at L1 with different sensors and radiation hardening profiles, side-looking scouts like spacecraft off the Sun-Earth line to image CMEs in 3D, and a backup at L5 that keeps watching when L1 blinks. Data must land via diverse paths, direct-to-Earth downlinks at different latitudes, relayed through TDRSS and commercial ground stations, so a single snowstorm or spectrum issue doesn't blind us. It's not glamorous, but it turns we think into we know 10 minutes sooner. On the grid, protection isn't prayer, it's impedance. Series capacitors cut the DC-like GIC path through long lines. Neutral blocking devices keep that slow current out of transformer windings.
Add real-time GIC sensors in substations tied to models of local geology, and operators stop flying by magnetometer proxies. You tune protective relays to ignore odd harmonics during storms without dulling them to real faults. And you buy time by prearranging controlled islanding plans, known cut points that let a region shed load gracefully instead of tearing itself apart. None of that matters if you can't swap dead iron. So Transformer Spares programs get real. Common footprints, pre-approved transport routes, and agreements that cross utility boundaries. Cables need hardening where they breathe, at the shore. PS get better common mode rejection, faster bias tracking, and alarms that distinguish slow geoelectric drift from true faults. Ground electrodes move from good enough to engineered. Low resistance sites with redundant paths and real-time potential monitoring. Repeaters can't be swapped mid-storm, but they can be made less twitchy. Wider control loop margins, crowbar protection that trips cleanly and auto-recovers, and spectral management that tolerates uneven lane losses. Operators practice storm modes, downshift modulation proactively, pre-agree to partial shutdowns on shaky branches, and script repower sequences that avoid flicker.
The boring part is paperwork. Multi-owner consortia commit to cut-here-first playbooks, so the 2 a.m. bridge call doesn't waste 15 minutes on blame. The internet's resilience is geography and habit. You diversify landings. More beaches, more paths inland that aren't all riding the same river valley or rail right-of-way. You grow regional 9th speeds, so traffic can stay local when oceans misbehave. You harden metro amplifier huts with better ride-through and mandatory test cycles that simulate sags and harmonics, not just clean outages. Routing teams reset instincts. Fewer clever policies, more manual drills. Hold-down timers increase during storm watches. RP key validators live behind redundant terrestrial timing and mirrored repositories. In a pinch, you default to prefer valid except unknown, with an expiration date written in the runbook, not in someone's memory. Timing becomes a portfolio, not a single stock. Multi-GNS is table stakes, GPS plus Galileo plus BDU plus GLONASS, through receivers that vote, not trust. Layer PTP over known good fiber with boundary clocks, and protect those spans like they carry cash. Put better oscillators everywhere, not just in a national telco core, but in regional.
Data centers and big enterprises. Rubidium buys you hours. High-end OXO buys you meaningful minutes at the edge. Most places can't afford atomic clocks per rack, but they can pool holdover across sites. If a city's grandmasters drift in different directions, a sane blend holds now inside tolerances. Satellites need both physics and ops. Shielding adds mass. Smart design adds margin. You spec deep dielectric mitigation, bake-in latch-up detectors with stage recovery, reset payload, then bus, then platform, and pre-planned low-duty survival modes that keep time and ephemerides healthy. LEO constellations use drag forecasts blended with real telemetry, keep propellant reserves for storm years, and automate safing without panicking. GEO birds rehearse charging scenarios, including ride dark scripts that keep thermal and power loops happy while payloads nap. Policy is the unsexy multiplier. Storm drills can't be PowerPoint. They need cross-industry days where utilities, telcos, exchanges, hospitals, and cloud providers run a red aurora scenario with real knobs turned. Regulators can mandate GIC sensor deployment and reporting, require stress tests that include undersea landing PFEs and metro huts, and clear fuel corridors for data center generators ahead of time. Insurance can price sloppiness. Better rates for hardened PFEs, proven storm playbooks, and transformer spares on dock. Procurement changes matter. Specify ride-through under distorted waveforms, not just uptime under perfect power. Cost versus risk is the adult conversation. In 3 years, you can deploy more GIC sensors, tune relays, add series caps to the worst corridors, mirror RPKI, buy better oscillators, and rehearse. In 10, you can add landings, move electrodes, widen 9XPs, field an L5 monitor, and standardize transformer fleets. The money goes far where single points of failure hide. Coastal PFEs, metro huts feeding big 9XPs, and long east-west grid lines over bad geology. It doesn't go far chasing every improbable edge case in software. Here's the wishful thinking to avoid. We'll just use satellites if cables go. No! AI will predict storms precisely. Not until we can read a CME's magnetic heart at the sun. We'll tell customers to expect outages. They already do. They need you to reduce them. The sober fix is layers that assume the worst and fail predictably. The next question on everyone's mind is simpler and meaner. Who loses internet first, and for how long? Who goes dark first and for how long? Risk maps don't care about slogans. They care about latitude, geology, and age. High latitude regions, Canada, Scandinavia, Scotland, Alaska, northern Russia, sit under the auroral oval where storms bite hardest. Long east-west transmission lines over resistive ground, couple more current. Think Quebec Shield, the US upper Midwest, northern UK grids, and parts of northern Europe. Older transformer fleets with limited GIC hardening add fragility. Put them together and you get the first tier of trouble. Coasts with dense cable landings make the internet fast on normal days and brittle on this one. The US Northeast, UK and Irish West Coast, Brittany and Normandy, the Benelux Shore, Japan's Pacific Edge, Taiwan's North, Singapore's Tuas and Changi, each host clusters of PFEs that breathe with the seafloor. If those rooms shift to conservative modes or take protective cuts, intercontinental capacity drops in chunks, not slivers. Inland, cities with diverse terrestrial paths and Big 9 XPs, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, London, Paris, Chicago, stay chatty locally while overseas links wobble. Who goes dark first? Not off, but elsewhere blind. High-latitude regions with long east-west lines may shed load preemptively within an hour of a strong southward field, trading rolling blackouts for iron survival. Islands at the edge of big oceans with few landings. New Zealand's South Island, parts of the Philippines, some West African coasts, risk longer international outages if a single system misbehaves. Equatorial metros fare better electrically, but can still lose timing. Scintillation batters, GNSS, so networks in Southeast Asia, Equatorial Africa, and Northern South America lean on holdover faster. Urban versus rural splits cleanly. Dense metros with multiple 9Ps and carrier hotels. Johannesburg, Nairobi, Sao Paulo, Dallas, Tokyo can reroute inside the island. Rural towns on single carrier backhauls and lone microwave rings feel binary. Either they're upstream holds or they vanish. In the US, northern tier co-ops with long feeders over resistive ground derate and shed. Sunbelt suburbs notice app weirdness more than lights out. Timing chaos hits fast, minutes to hours. Expect microsecond sensitive systems to degrade within the first hour in high latitude and equatorial scintillation zones, with gradual recovery as holdover routines settle and multi-GNSS blends tame the ionosphere. Routing stability takes longer, hours to a day as BGP dampening and manual.
Pinning corral flaps, especially across the Atlantic, where a handful of trunks carry outsized share. Payment reliability tracks those clocks and routes. Same-day friction, next-day cleanup. Hardware replacement is the long tail. A cooked distribution transformer is days. A large auto transformer is weeks to months, depending on spares and transport. Subsea repeaters are measured in ship calendars, weather windows, permits, and mobilization. Realistically, partial transoceanic capacity reductions could persist for days while operators run in conservative spectral modes. A few unlucky spans might limp for weeks until a maintenance ship swaps a unit. A micro-story anchors it. A coastal tech city with 3 transatlantic landings, call it a familiar hub, loses one landing to a PFE trip and another to a deliberate cut to save a trunk. The third runs with downshifted modulation. International capacity halves. Inside the city, peering is rich. Local platforms work. For 6 days, the tech sector goes remote local. Builds deploy to regional artifact stores. Video calls with overseas teams fall back to audio. CI pipelines that fetch from distant registries move on net. Nobody is offline. Everybody is slower. So what's the practical prep without doom? For businesses at high latitudes and cable edges, rehearse storm modes. Pre-stage artifacts and mirrors inside your region. Add multi-source timing, GNSS plus terrestrial PTP, and verify holdover for hours, not minutes. Harden power ride-through against sags and harmonics. Test UPS transfer under distorted waveforms. Write runbooks that assume overseas origins are unreachable for a day. For households, modest cache, printed contacts, offline maps, batteries for a day or two, and patience with card networks. If you live in a single carrier town, a second SIM from a different carrier is cheap resilience. The internet won't die, it'll partition. The places that feel it longest sit where angry sky meets old iron and lonely beaches. Practical prep without panic. You don't need a bunker, you need a plan you'll actually use. Start with the basics that shorten outages and smooth the weird hours. For households, think day or two comfortably.
Small cash because offline card limits run out. Printed contacts for family, doctors, and work because phones still die and logins sometimes won't. Offline maps for your city and the routes you drive. Extra batteries, a charged power bank, and a way to cook if the stove is electric. Keep a paper list of account numbers you might need to read over a phone line to your bank. None of this is dramatic. It's the same kit that helps in snowstorms. Connectivity isn't all or nothing. If you live in a one-carrier town, a second SIM on a different network is cheap resilience. Turn on Wi-Fi calling and know how to flip it off if your ISP, not your carrier, is the bottleneck. Pre-download entertainment and school materials for kids so a few hours of partitioned internet doesn't feel like a crisis. For small businesses, run books beat heroics. Print one page for storm mode, where your artifacts live locally, who can approve cash sales, how to batch card transactions for later capture, and who has authority to extend token lifetimes if identity systems choke. Set up read-only mirrors of critical docs and software inside your region. If your ERP is cloud-hosted far away, keep a CSV export you can operate from for a day. Test it once. You'll find the missing field you wish you'd exported. Power is as much about quality as uptime. Ask your electrician to test UPS transfer under dirty waveforms, not just a clean pull. If you run a small server closet, keep spare fans and a temperature alarm that calls a cell, not just sends email. Stage fuel for generators with your neighbors. Share delivery agreements, keep tanks topped when roads get busy. Hospitals and clinics should have a memorandum with a nearby site for a backup link and a patient transfer protocol that assumes paper for a day. Timing sounds exotic. It's not. If you run anything that depends on synchronized systems, databases, telecom, control, set up multi-source time. GNSS diversity, plus a terrestrial PTP feed where possible. If not, pick 2 upstream NTP sources with proven holdover and put a decent oscillator on your Grandmaster. Rubidium is great. A good OXY XO still buys meaningful minutes. Test holdover with the antenna unplugged. Write down the drift you see and the point where your apps complain. On the network side, make island mode a choice, not an accident. Pre-positioned software artifacts, container images, and package mirrors inside your city. CDN on net storage isn't just for scale, it's for storms. If your product depends on a single upstream identity or payments endpoint overseas, add a domestic fallback or a cache decision mode with clear, reversible limits. Decide now what you'll allow offline and for how long. Communications matter more than bandwidth. Set up a small group text that
becomes your incident channel. Pick a radio fallback if you have the skills. Ham gateways and GMR's repeaters can bridge short gaps. Out-of-band management saves nights. A secondary path to consoles and power strips that doesn't ride your main backbone. Community turns inconvenience into routine. Schools can keep emergency assignments on paper and hand them out at the start of storm season. Local governments can pre-publish where to get fuel, medical care, and public Wi-Fi if the main lines wobble. Grocery co-ops can stage paper processes and set expectations for cash-preferred days without guilt. Finally, rehearse once. A 2-hour Red Aurora drill where you flip your office to local time sources, serve everything from regional caches, and process sales offline will surface the 3 brittle things you didn't know about. Write them down, fix 2, except 1. You can't stop the sun. You can make the outage smaller and the story boring. The internet isn't a cloud, it's wire, glass, clocks, and people making sharp choices under ugly skies. If you want the follow-up on hard fixes already rolling out, and the ones nobody wants to fund, subscribe and watch our deep dive on timing that keeps civilization honest. New episodes weekly, drop your questions, and we'll test them against the physics.